Have you ever read a Bible story that felt like it was written for today? A prophecy so specific, so detailed, that it seems to echo through the corridors of modern history? Today, we read diving into one of the most powerful and controversial prophecies in the Old Testament, one that might just change how you see history, identity, and the story of an entire people. This is the story of a 400-year promise and its shocking modern parallel. Let's go back to Genesis chapter 15. Imagine Abraham standing under a vast star-filled sky. He's troubled, he's getting older, and he has no heir. His dream of a great nation feels impossibly far away. Then, in the silence of the night, God speaks to him. "Look toward heaven," God says, "and count the stars, if you are able to number them. So shall your descendants be." It's a moment of incredible hope. But then, God reveals something unexpected. Something darker, a prophecy that would shape the destiny of a people not yet born. He says, "Know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs and will be servants there, and they will be afflicted for 400 years. God continues, "But I will bring judgment on the nation that they serve, and afterward they shall come out with great possessions." For thousands of years, this prophecy has been traditionally linked to the Israelites' time in Egypt, their enslavement and eventual exodus. But when you look closely at the timeline, questions start to arise. Did the Israelites really spend a full 400 years in Egypt? The numbers can be debated, and that's where new, powerful interpretations begin to surface, interpretations that hit very close to home for millions of people today. Now let's fast forward a few thousand years. For many people of African descent, the words of Genesis 15 resonate on a completely different frequency. Why? Because in August of 1619, a ship arrived on the shores of Virginia, carrying the first enslaved Africans to be sold in British North America. A people captured. A people taken to a land that was not their own. A people stripped of their names, their culture, their freedom, and forced into brutal servitude. From that moment, a 400-year clock began to tick. It was a period defined by slavery, unimaginable oppression, the Jim Crow era of segregation, and ongoing systemic racism. It was 400 years of economic exploitation, cultural erasure, and deep generational affliction. For many, the parallels to the prophecy are simply unmistakable. Strangers in a foreign land, a 400-year season of suffering, and the promise of an eventual deliverance. As the year 2019 approached, many in the community saw it as a symbolic turning point, the prophesied end of a 400-year arc of affliction, and the dawn of a new era of awakening and restoration. But this interpretation goes even deeper, touching on a profound question of identity. Hamite or Shemite? For centuries, a twisted and unbiblical teaching known as the curse of Ham was used to justify racism and slavery. This false narrative incorrectly labeled Africans as cursed descendants of Ham, destined for servitude. It was a horrific misuse of scripture to fuel an evil institution. However, a growing number of scholars and theologians argue that many African-descended peoples are not Hamites at all, but Shemites, descendants from the line of Shem, the very lineage of Abraham himself. This belief is rooted in the idea that during the numerous exiles and invasions of ancient Israel, many Israelites fled for their lives. Where did they go? South into Africa. It's theorized that they journeyed across the continent, with many settling in West Africa, the very regions from which millions were later captured and forced into the transatlantic slave trade. The cultural evidence is compelling. Many West African traditions show striking similarities to ancient Hebrew customs. Practices like circumcision, deep-rooted monotheistic beliefs, specific naming ceremonies, dietary laws reminiscent of kosher rules, and the observance of a day of rest, similar to the Sabbath. We already have modern communities like the Lemba in southern Africa and the Beta Israel of Ethiopia, who have confirmed Israelite heritage through DNA and oral traditions. This raises a monumental question. Could the descendants of the so-called lost tribes of Israel be found among the peoples scattered by the slave trade? The historical connections add another layer of intrigue. We know from historical records and biblical accounts that migration patterns often led Israelites toward Africa during times of war and persecution. The prophet Jeremiah fled to Egypt. Jewish communities have existed across North and East Africa for thousands of years. When researchers compare the cultural practices of certain West African ethnic groups with Old Testament law, the parallels are often too numerous and too specific to be dismissed as mere coincidence. For many, this isn't a coincidence at all, it's a cultural memory. It's an echo of a forgotten identity, now resurfacing after centuries of being buried. But let's remember, the prophecy in Genesis 15 does not end with suffering. It ends with a powerful promise of deliverance and restoration. God declared, "I will judge the nation they serve, and afterward they shall come out with great possessions." For many who see themselves in this prophecy, this isn't just about financial wealth. It's about coming out with something far more valuable. It speaks of reclaiming a stolen cultural and spiritual identity. It signifies rising from the ashes of centuries of oppression and embracing a profound spiritual awakening. It's about rediscovering a direct connection to the biblical narrative and their place within it. This isn't just a history lesson. For millions, it's a living, breathing movement. A movement of restoration, of identity, and of a divine calling being fulfilled in our lifetime. They believe they are not just descendants of slaves, but descendants of patriarchs, prophets, and kings, now awakening to their true heritage.